Thank you for that very kind introduction, Habib. It is certainly my pleasure to be joining all of you today virtually to be giving this keynote plenary presentation. I am pleased to discuss with all of you today critical issues in transportation as defined by the TRB Executive Committee. They worked on a document that was issued in 2019 called Critical Issues in Transportation 2019. There are two addenda that have been issued since that time, and they are starting work on the next edition. So I'm going to be highlighting several of the issues from 2019 and give you some updated information as well. As Habib said, I am the Executive Director of TRB. The Critical Issues in Transportation 2019 document was a product of the TRB Executive Committee supported by TRB staff. So before I get to the main part of my presentation, I recognize that there are some in the audience who are not familiar with the Transportation Research Board. Just wanted to give a brief introduction to TRB. We like to say that we have three major functions: convening, research, and advising. We have the largest meeting on transportation research held in the world, with over 14,000 attendees when we're able to have it in person. We have 175 standing committees and task forces, and we conduct over 50 conferences and workshops for a year and over 100 webinars. We have 4 large research programs in highways, transit, airport, behavioral traffic safety. We publish over 600 papers. And we maintain a bibliographic database with over 1.25 million records, a resource that I'll give you the link to later. And we are part of the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine, and we do policy studies on behalf of the federal government, both Congress and the administration, usually on issues either that are controversial or where there is disagreement in terms of what should be done from a policy perspective. So Critical Issues in Transportation was issued in January of 2019. What we attempted to do through Critical Issues in Transportation really was to address important policy and research questions for the next 5 to 10 years. This document is issued by the TRB Executive Committee about every 5 years or so, and it's intended to provide guidance to TRB's programs and committees on important issues that the Executive Committee would like them to be focusing on. It's actually 2 different documents: a policy snapshot that talks about 12 topic areas, and then a full list of 63 issues within those 12 topic areas as well. And the URL is there for your information. 2 addenda have been issued, the first in January of 2021 on COVID-19's impact on transportation. And just earlier this month, on July 15th, one on racial equity issues in transportation as well. And the TRB Executive Committee has started work on the next edition at its meeting that was just recently held, July 19th and 20th. The 12 topic areas are listed here. I was asked specifically to focus on the 4 that are highlighted in red, but the topic areas include transformational technologies and services, serving a growing and shifting population, which really addresses a number of the demographic changes that are taking place, energy and sustainability, resilience and security. We actually grouped together safety and public health issues. The public health community has actually recognized transportation safety as one of their top public health issues. So we felt it was appropriate to address the 2 of them together. The 2019 edition was the first in over 40 years that it actually had equity as a topic area. And obviously its attention and importance has increased since that time as well. Governance issues, system performance and management issues, funding and finance issues, together with safety, have been two issues that actually have been highlighted in each of the issues that have been that have come out over the last 40 years: goods movement, institutional and workforce capacity issues, and research and innovation. So I'm going to start now by highlighting each of the four areas that I had shown in red before. Before I actually get into the issues associated with transformational technologies, there are so many of them, so many of these technology changes that are taking place. I thought I ought to provide a list of what I mean when I talk about transformational technologies: automated and autonomous vehicles, connected vehicles, electric vehicles, shared mobility services, both the transportation network companies and car sharing, as well as micromobility. And if we look at what is happening in terms of shared, connected, and autonomous vehicles, many think that those three technologies together are really going to be combined to have shared, connected, autonomous, and electric vehicles. Mobility on demand and mobility as a service, microtransit, which is starting to be combined together with on-demand services. Autonomous transit vehicles are being piloted in a number of locations now. Truck platooning and autonomous trucks are also actually in service right now, particularly in the Southwest US, but in other states as well. Originally, we called it urban air mobility, but it's now being expanded to areas other than urban areas. So the term now is being called advanced air mobility. And then other technological changes. One that I'll particularly highlight is the use of artificial intelligence in transportation as well. So the issues that had been identified in 2019 included the role of policy in the development of connected and automated vehicles, but also options to manage travel, congestion and emissions, ways that we can be trying to achieve net social benefits, transition period issues as we move towards completely autonomous vehicles and have mixed traffic, needed public sector investments, particularly associated with connected vehicles and infrastructure as well. Second issue really dealt with shared mobility services, their relationship to transit. How can we be actually trying to have transit and shared mobility services work together as a system? Regulatory issues between taxis and transportation network companies. As many of you are aware, a number of taxi companies have actually gone out of business as a result of Uber and Lyft. Balancing state and federal safety oversight and sharing of information on pilots. Federal government really has taken the lead in terms of the motor vehicle issues, with state and local government really taking the lead in terms of driver issues, licensing issues, and other safety issues as well. Government oversight of artificial intelligence. As computers are starting to make a lot of the decisions, what type of oversight do we need from a regulatory standpoint, from an artificial intelligence standpoint? And then what can we expect in terms of behavioral responses to all of these various transformational technologies, both in terms of number of trips, mode, willingness to pool, auto ownership, residential, commercial location, safety issues with semi-automated vehicles, and public acceptance of the risk associated with automated vehicles. And I could spend time talking in detail about any of these issues, but with the time that I have available, I will move on. So since the Critical Issues in Transportation 2019 edition was issued, we've seen, particularly with COVID-19 pandemic, changes in telework, and what I call telemobility, so things like telemedicine, teleshopping. Impacts on transit. What are going to be the long-term impacts on transit? Major increases in online retail purchases have certainly had an impact on transportation as well. We've seen major advances in micromobility. It was initially identified in the 2019 edition, but much more changes are taking place. New partnerships, particularly between infrastructure owners and auto manufacturers. What is going to be the role in terms of those new partnerships? Again, artificial intelligence and its role has really advanced in the 2 years since then. There have been a lot of issues that have come out with regard to data sharing at the federal government. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration just issued a notice in terms of data that has to be reported anytime that there are safety incidents with automated vehicles, as well as what data is going to be shared with state and local governments, and safety assurance issues as well. What is the role of these transformational technologies in smart cities? Cybersecurity issues have been a major issue, consumer privacy and data protection. Public acceptance, the jury is still out in terms of what is going to be the public acceptance of these new technologies, particularly after the fatal crash that took place with the Uber vehicle in Tempe, Arizona. Public acceptance in surveys was shown to be decreased significantly. A number of equity issues, planning issues, and what are the climate change impacts of new technologies? So the evolution in terms of issues that we are looking at associated with these transformational technologies just within the last two years has been very significant. On the energy and sustainability front, we had identified the whole issue of reducing greenhouse gas emissions in 2019. It has clearly received much more focus, particularly in the current administration. Policies to move towards more sustainable energy sources for transportation. Particularly when you think about the goal of reducing greenhouse gas emissions and move towards electric vehicles, we will really only achieve what the goals are if the energy that is being supplied for those vehicles is coming from sustainable sources. Electric powered transportation, obviously the move towards electric vehicles, but not just light duty vehicles. More and more we're looking at heavier duty vehicles as well, and what are going to be the impacts on the electric grid. And then an issue in terms of how sustainability considerations are incorporated into decision-making. So many decisions that are made, particularly by elected officials, have very short-term considerations, and how do we get more focus on those long-term considerations? Since the 2019 edition came out, obviously there's been much more focus on electric vehicle charging infrastructure, with the current administration especially focused on that. What will be the tipping point at which electric vehicles will start to dominate the market? All of the auto manufacturers now are moving towards many more models being available. Battery technology has advanced significantly just in the last 2 years. The range of vehicles before they have to be recharged has increased. And I think the auto manufacturers are really expecting within the next 2 or 3 years, we're going to see a major shift from the majority of vehicles that are purchased being internal combustion engine vehicles to becoming electric vehicles. Freight is moving more and more towards, I will call sustainable energy as well. Not just electric vehicles, more towards hydrogen-powered vehicles, more towards sustainable aviation, for example. How do we take into account the equity parts of the sustainability three-part stool has received much more attention as well. On the resilience and security front, in 2019, we were very focused on the issue of how do we add more security while still maintaining mobility. So we're all very familiar with aviation and what we have to do in terms of going through checkpoints there, but a lot of concern in terms of security on modes like rail and transit as well. The risk management approach towards resilience. What are the methods that we really should be taking in terms of risk management? Adaptation to severe weather events and climate change. And you'll see on the next slide that has received that much more attention in the last couple of years. Security risks from drones. And it's expanding into the advanced aviation mobility as well. Cybersecurity issues, GPS vulnerabilities have both received much more attention. And then evacuation issues, particularly associated with severe weather events. So in terms of current issues that have received more attention in the last couple of years, lessons learned from the pandemic regarding widespread system disruptions, impacts of increased frequency of severe weather events on the transportation system. We have seen many more of these severe weather events in the last couple of years. A lot more attention towards the whole issue of managed retreat. And it's not just in areas immediately adjacent and affected by sea level rise, but greater flooding events taking place in the interior of the US as well. Increased sophistication of cybersecurity and ransomware events. And we've certainly seen that, for example, in terms of the shutdown of the pipelines this year as well. And then equity issues associated with resilience and security. And as we take more and more actions to try to address resilience and security issues, really taking into account what the equity issues are. On the system performance and asset management side, in 2019, the rule had been out for still a relatively short period of time in terms of addressing system performance. We've had 2 more years of experience with that. And I think it's being incorporated much more in terms of decision-making as well. How can new technology substitute for adding capacity? The hope is that when we move towards completely automated vehicles, we'll be able to have much closer spacing in terms of vehicles and perhaps not having to be providing as much capacity in terms of infrastructure. And ensuring that new technology is incorporated into new infrastructure, especially connected vehicle technology. Investing in preservation and maintenance, asset management, lifecycle cost and decision-making. And then new materials and construction techniques. And Maine has certainly been a leader in this area as well as new materials and construction techniques being considered in maintenance approaches. So again, in the last 2 years, this balance between system preservation and system expansion has received a lot of attention and discussion, the infrastructure discussions that are taking place in Washington. The whole issue of infrastructure costing more in the US versus other countries. Why is that the case? What do we need to be doing to try to bring down the cost relative to what it costs in other countries? And part of it really is associated with delays due to regulatory and legal constraints. Use of big data for system performance and asset conditions. So for example, the collection of cell phone data by users and being able to have much better real-time information in terms of congestion on the system is an example. How to incorporate climate change, sustainability, and equity considerations into asset management is again an issue that really is evolving and has evolved in the last couple of years. And then domestic sourcing of key materials and components has also received a lot more attention during the pandemic. I think this really has increased attention on this issue. So that's been a very, very quick overview of 4 of the 12 topic areas that we had in critical issues in transportation. I would like to extend an invitation to all of you to help us identify what the key issues are that should be in the next edition of Critical Issues in Transportation. I'll give you my email address in just a moment, but we're just starting what will probably be about a 1.5-year process in terms of development of the next additional critical issues in transportation, and we would welcome your input. In terms of criteria for the potential issues, they should be issues of strategic importance. They should be important policy or research questions that result from issues outside of transportation that affect transportation. Change policy priorities that have made an issue important or have raised questions or warrant attention. New knowledge or innovations that have created new issues. Issues previously identified that are still important, but perhaps have not gotten the attention that they deserve. Issues that are important across multiple modes of transportation, and new issues that have surfaced from research or the implementation of research or technology since the last edition. So I welcome all of you to be providing input to learn more about TRB. It's very easy to remember our website, trb.org. I encourage you to go to that website. You can sign up to, if you are not already signed up for our TRB Weekly e-newsletter. Become a friend of one or more of our TRB standing committees, and you would get information from the committee. You sign up through a website called mytrb.org, and that registers you in our database, and then you can very easily sign up to become a friend of TRB at that website. Take advantage of our bibliographic database at trid.trb.org. I invite all of you to participate in our TRB annual meeting, which will be held in Washington, D.C., January 9th to the 13th. And if you have any thoughts or ideas that you want to contribute regarding our critical issues, or if you want to be contacting me directly, there is my email address, and Pedersen@nas.edu.